Hey, alright, I got my foot up on the gas. It's the Joe Q Car Show podcast. Let's go.
Welcome to the Joe Q Car Show. I'm Joe, and we have an esteemed guest this week, Mr. Nick Roman. I'm so excited to hear and see from you. Thank you for coming on the show of RCR fame, regular car review fame. Nick, tell me, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm actually working on a video essay that I want to drop next week because I saw a rumor that Cash for Clunkers was coming back. And so I don't want to it's weird because I'm in the middle of like writing another RCR stories, which is like our little documentary videos. And I had to take a break from that to write this essay because I felt a certain like exigency of the circumstances to sort of write about it because we're still very much in a sort of rumor mill stage. And I guess like there are 3 or 4 sources that I'm getting this from, in terms of publications, people of a certain standing who are talking about it. And so I figured like I would talk about it and just do like one of those typical YouTuber type rants about it. Like I've done 2 essays like this before, one about left lane bandits and then this other one about angry car headlights, about like why cars are designs are so aggressive these days. But this one is more about kind of the issues of potentially doing Cash for Clunkers again. It's something that, because I did the RCR stories on it last year, it's still very fresh. And so I feel like there's a lot to still sort of relitigate in a way about how Cash for Clunkers, a redo, would kind of set us back in a way. But like, I also get it from a short-term gains perspective, but I wouldn't want to necessarily, like, it's me attempting to analyze, okay, what are the positives of this potentially? And what are the massive amounts of negatives to this? Because I feel like it's something where the bad sort of outweighs the good. That's always kind of been my stance about it, where like I could understand where people might be coming from in thinking about why this would be the approach to make, but ultimately feeling as though it's not necessarily an approach worth making when you can kind of make adjustments in other areas. So to greater effect also.
I feel, well, I was just going to say that the Cash for Clunkers coming up again is very topical. Normally your RCR stories, now that's a series on your YouTube channel where you kind of take a deep dive, like you said, it was a documentary.
Yeah.
What tends to give you the inspiration for these RCR stories? Are they things because you're covering car reviews in your regular car reviews, and then these RCR stories are a little bit more long form? What got you to, what made you interested in doing a little bit more long form stuff?
Well, when I first started doing solo videos for RCR, I got a lot of complaints because I wasn't Brian. Like, it's okay. Like, that's not anything that, like, yeah, I was upset about it then, but I completely understood it because Brian has such a clear and concise voice. Even before we started this, and I was just like his friend, I always thought like, man, you have a really nice voice for radio. And I knew that he had done radio. Like I had done college radio too. And we had done radio together in grad school, doing like a car show, where we would just kind of rip on ads in the Auto Trader. But it was also something where I knew there was a risk in me coming and making my own videos. And so the idea was, if I'm going to do my own videos, I shouldn't try to do something that Brian would do because he would just do it better. Now, of course, that's changed over the years where like now I do like car show videos of like ripping on cars one by one, but I like to think that I do them differently because and not better, because Brian, like the things that he comes up with off the top of his head, like I would need to literally sit down for like an hour to try to think of some of the things that he comes up with just off the top of his head. So it's kind of different for me because I have to almost come in with jokes preloaded if I'm going to do that. But also, if I go to a car show, I don't necessarily know what I'm going to find there. So it's more or less luck if I come across something that I can apply a pre-written joke to. And so, like, in a way, I have to find a different way to do it. So, like, when I did my fake New York Auto Show video like 2 weeks ago, it was just me printing out a bunch of pictures of cars and hanging them around the room and pretending that I was at the New York Auto Show and ragging on the cars like that. And so that's something that I can bring a different voice to the format, in addition to like my regular responsibilities as co-writing the scripts and doing the music. Um, like just yesterday, I sent Brian my notes for our video 2 weeks from now, and that I'm really excited about. In terms of like, not excited about in terms of necessarily what the car is, but with the content of what the video is, because I feel like it's a nice balance of humor and history. But
It
oh,
seems like your channel has been going in this direction where it was the focus on the car and then sprinkling in a little narrative here or there, but then you're kind of moving forward with a lot more narrative, and the car is a vessel for a bigger story.
well,
It
yeah, like the name of the channel is almost kind of a troll. Like Brian specifically named it that so that people would think they were getting a normal review of cars. Like regular cars is kind of like a weird, like it's like hiding weirdness in plain sight, or the unexpected in plain sight, in that yes, we're talking about a car, but we're not really talking about a car. We're kind of doing armchair analysis of the types of people who drive these cars, and doing maybe like a historical sort of abstract about where these cars come from, why they're popular or why they failed. But within those margins, there's sort of room to talk about how, you know, like talk about it as if it were just a normal car review, which is something we didn't always do. And so, um, ultimately, when I set out to do my own videos, I realized that if I were going to have people actually like the content I was putting out, I had to put out something different from Brian, something that for the most part Brian didn't have the time to do because he spends so much time editing. Like it does take him, he puts in an incredible amount of work to get the shows up every single Monday. And so I have a little more time to do these deep dives. And so when it started out, I wanted to do the story of the Dale with Liz Carmichael because I was a big fan of Unsolved Mysteries growing up. That was a story that I always remembered. And so I'm like, if people don't know this story, this is a really cool story. And also, when I had seen that Unsolved Mysteries as a kid, there was like an update to it, but it wasn't really like it told me anything that happened. And so I was sort of interested in doing a little bit of a deeper dive into the background of that, not necessarily knowing if anyone would even be interested in hearing about it. But when I put it up, the original one, it did decent numbers and people seemed to like the format. And so I ended up redoing that video last year because there were some things in the original that were statistically or factually incorrect, and it always bothered me. And also, like some of the jokes always bothered me too, like they aged poorly, which is part of like, it's not like I was getting complaints about it, but it just bothered me on a personal. Well, I mean, I did get like one or two, but we always get like complaints every now and then about certain jokes. But I mean, from a personal standpoint, that it bothered me enough to want to like redo it, not just for the jokes, but also for the information. Like the information, I had found out a couple more things that I didn't know that I'm like, how did I not include this in the original one? Like, how on earth did I miss that? And so I was really excited to redo that one. And from there, once I realized that I had a format that people actually wanted to kind of listen to, even though they were like glorified PowerPoint presentations, I started sourcing ideas from the fans. Like the first couple ones were all just like off the top of my head, of like stories that I would want to see investigated, like James Dean's like cursed Porsche, or oh, what else? Like the Edsel, like the failure of that. Those are things that kind of interested me, or Lee Iacocca's life story. But then I started like asking other people about, hey, what would you think would make it for a good RCR story? And I'm like, well, Isle of Man TT, that'd be a good one. Or, someone else said, like Dieselgate or Cash for Clunkers or the Life and Death of Pontiac. It's like I realized that after a certain point, the best ideas are going to come from the fans because they know what they want to see better than I do. Like, it's nice for me to be able to do what I want to see, but also I have an audience to cater to. And I would want realistically to be at the center of that Venn diagram between keeping me satisfied and interested and engaged and keeping them satisfied, interested, engaged, and just have that be the cross section and have that be somebody else's window into RCR if they don't like the normal videos of if the humor doesn't hit with them, if they don't necessarily like the format, that well, here's this other side of RCR that perhaps you can enjoy, that it's kind of like an RCR investigates, but not really because we're not drawing conclusions. So yeah, that's something that
Just you're just reporting the facts.
as best
um,
as I can arrange them, because sometimes I get things wrong. Like we're not really journalists in the traditional sense. We're just trying to hammer out videos and getting facts correct to the best of our ability. But like, we will make mistakes. It's guaranteed. And probably more than often than people who sort of are more idiosyncratic about scripts. Like there are really simple things that will get wrong, and I'll get them wrong, or Brian will get them wrong. Like we'll misspeak even though it's right or it's correct in the script, but we won't catch it. It's like those types of things. But I also realize that for as much as it frustrates people, um, in a way, we're not trying to pretend that we're anything more than we are, which is to
that
say that,
is,
like, yeah,
I just think the authenticity of your channel and your content is what shines through. You know, you have this wacky comedy style with these big ideas, these artful ideas under it, and then it's all authentic from these just guys from Pennsylvania and not from, Philly, from the sticks, Pennsylvania,
yeah,
making this content. And I think that's what's so for me when I'm watching this stuff, I it's inspiring because it's like, wow, these guys, they had a great idea and they went for it. And I just really have a lot of respect for what you have been able to do as a team, and then also being able to make the show as big as it is. The fact that you've kind of that you're holding true in your Venn diagram of life, right? Like you're
yeah.
able to uh, have, your one side where it's like, okay, I don't want to just do total fan service. I want to make sure I'm happy, and let's meet somewhere in the middle. Finding that balance is hard. How hard was it to find that balance? Do you feel like you went too far one way or the other at times?
Yeah, there are absolutely videos where I feel like I don't know, maybe it was too dry or maybe it was too over the top. Well, actually, I rarely ever find that if we go over the top on the video that we went too far. I generally, if there's a video that I'm dissatisfied with, it's usually because like maybe the writing on my end was too dry, and I'm just like, I wish I had been more colorful, but for whatever reason that week, it's like, that's the thing of like the nature of the deadline makes it so that you can't wait for inspiration to hit. You literally, I mean, writing is a job, and it was my dream job ever since I was young. And so when I graduated college on the back of like the '08 recession, and then I went into grad school to kind of like try to ride that out. And that's where I met Brian. But it's also like I eventually got to that dream job, but it took me a whole hell of a lot longer to get there to where I'm making a living with my writing. But it's something where I don't know that we'll ever truly achieve the balance that people would like for us to achieve because it's
Well,
such a different and the
yeah.
evolution of the show is like natural. It's gonna happen, but yeah.
But you go around trying to please other people and then you end up being unhappy. So, you're doing it right.
Yeah.
I will validate your decision so far.
Thanks.
So
Yeah.
why was writing your dream job?
Because it was one of the only things I did well when I was a kid. Like, I mean,
Fair.
no, I was like very bookish, and I liked writing stories, and so I thought, like, yeah, maybe I'll like write a book one day, or maybe I'll, write for TV or write a movie or something, and it's all these things where I'm like not even sure how one goes about doing any of that other than to just write. And after a while, I had an in with an entertainment blog, started writing for them. And then after a while, like my TV reviews were picking up traction on not the Google algorithm, but like the Yahoo one of all places. And eventually, like I got a pull quote used on the back of the season 5 DVD for The Walking Dead, but it doesn't actually have my name on it. It just has the site that I was working for. So it's like as emotionally savage as ever, Ricky.O.
Ugh.
And so, but it didn't need to have my name on it. I was just like stoked that like those are my words on a box for a TV show I don't even watch anymore.
I thought your description was it was emotionally savage not to have your name, not that was what was written on
Oh
the
no, I
box.
was
So,
literally on that like, and it wasn't
okay.
even a positive review. It was just kind of like in the opening paragraph, I was just like, and oh well, Walking Dead is back, and it says emotionally savage as ever, blah blah blah, and it was one of those shows that
It's a,
I couldn't
it's a
really
good
keep
line.
with. Yeah, no, I have moments. It's just I was just kind of in this weird spot where like my Sundays were the worst in terms of workload because I was watching something like 5 shows on a Sunday night and like writing reviews for all of them. And so I had like, The Walking Dead, I had like The Newsroom, I had Revenge, Once Upon a Time. Oh, and I
Oh,
had one more, and I don't remember what. Oh, I had Mad Men, but that wasn't on at the same time. Like they were AMC scheduling. It's like some shows are on and some are off at different times of year. I mean, that's all television, really. But it was really intensive. Actually, it's almost was more intensive than RCR in the sense that like with RCR, I mean, I could it's preferable if I get my side of the script written earlier rather than later, but I have the freedom to be able to wait until the last minute for sort of, give a little bit more time to sort of let what I've written stew over so that I could see with maybe a fresh pair of eyes in a few hours or maybe the next day how it works or doesn't work. Whereas this one, it's like TV schedule. So I gotta, have this out after it's done and then on and on. And so I got used to writing a ton of words a day about different shows and approaching them in different, with different perspectives because I can't necessarily review Downton Abbey the same way that I review The Walking Dead. And I can't really live blog The X Factor the same way that I would live blog sort of like, I don't know, the season, an episode of Survivor, like those types of things. It's just a different sort of
did
approach.
did you
And
have did were you focused on TV shows and movies as a passion of yours, or was that just like, hey, this is my writing job, this is what I'm gonna go into? How did that come about?
oh, it was both. And towards the tail end of my time as like a, for lack of a better term, like a critic, because I did get press credentials and sort of press screeners for certain shows. That I was doing RCR at the same time. And after a while, it got to be that, I don't know. Like I just it's not necessarily that the writing for TV or writing about TV was less rewarding. It was just that RCR was more appealing because it's more about making sort of your own content, making your own art in a way, and sort of having the freedom to say, this is what I want to talk about, and doing it on mostly your own time. and doing it with someone who you trust. I mean, which is not to say that I didn't trust my coworker. Like, I loved my coworkers at my old job. Um, they were all really good people and really nice, and I still keep in touch with some of them. But a lot of it is that like Brian and I like clicked pretty quickly. Like I mean, he was the first friend I made in grad school, and it was mostly because I felt like he was the only one I could really talk to, you know, because he seemed like the most approachable, which I don't know if he'd be like weirded out to hear that, but he did come across as a very approachable person, and I thought he was cool because he like would ride a motorcycle to class, and you know, it's like these little things of just he probably thought he was like awkward and weird, but I thought he was like really cool. And so it's like those types of things. And then we started hanging out, and eventually, and sometimes we just like go get coffee in my hometown and just sit by the window and like rag on cars as they drove by. And you know, I realized that like RCR as it is now is kind of like it was just a natural progression of what we used to do before we made a job out of it, or
So
before Brian grew it into a job.
it sounds like you put a lot of you put a lot of this onto Brian for growing it, like you just said. Why is that? Do you feel like you are? I mean, you guys are obviously a team, but it sounds like you feel like you owe him something.
Well, no, it's not. It's well, I mean, it's in a literal sense, like he did start it, and so like I came on. My first video was the Avenger review because like he had been doing it for a while, and there was a time where like the Miata video came out, and that got like a big boost, and I thought that was hilarious. And eventually, um, he had made the decision that like he was really gonna like go for this and try to make this a thing. And since we were already like hanging out and talking about cars and doing all this other stuff, like just people watching and ripping on cars and doing radio, he was just like, "Hey, do you want to write this with me?" And I'm like, "I'll give you, you know, this, that, and the other thing, and we'll see how it goes." I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Why the hell not?" You know? And so, yeah.
So you said that you did a radio show at your college level with Brian. So is that where you guys did the cars? Did the drinking coffee and making fun of cars happen before or after this radio show? Like how did this idea happen?
It was like at the same time as the radio show because Brian was doing radio at KUR Kutztown at the university, the college. And so when we started, he would have me on as a guest, essentially, and then I became a more frequent guest because it's like I didn't really have anything to do during the day because I all of my shows were at night that I had to like cover. And so after a while, RCR just felt like a natural progression of what we were already doing. And so it was really neat and really interesting to be able to talk about cars professionally because I got to learn a lot more than I thought I knew, which at the time was honestly not that much because I had this very surface level understanding of what you know was appealing and what had certain cultural cachet to it. um and so this as a byproduct forced me to sort of re-examine what it is that cars mean for people and for companies and for society in general, which sounds really pretentious but ultimately it's kind of a line of thinking that either works or it doesn't, depending on the video that we're talking about. I did one of the videos that we're coming out with. I compare like a car to like a crock pot, and it's one of those things where like it doesn't make sense if I say it now, but hopefully when you see it in the video, like the crock pot analogy will work because of everything else that I kind of like wrote after it. And so but it's one of those things where I think for the most part, fans are getting better at telling who wrote which part of the script. Because I lean heavy on sort of vague sentimentality, and which is not to say like we don't both contribute on sentimentality and nostalgia the same way that we both contribute to jokes, but
that
yeah.
word sentimentality is a word that Brian used maybe more than once last time in the previous episode of the Joe Q Car Show here. Um, is that something you're focusing on more lately, or is this just something that's getting into the script more just because of everything that's going on in the world or where you're at in your life right now? Why is it becoming more heartfelt?
um I don't know. Like sometimes it's the car,
Hmm.
because sometimes the car will trigger something that was thought kind of to be, I don't know. I'm trying to remember which car it was where I wrote this like extended bit that I wasn't sure Brian was even going to use. Because I always tell Brian, like, if I send you the script and there's something that you want to cut or things that you don't think work with your half of the script, like, you will not offend me. I promise you. You're not going to offend me if you cut it. Like, I'm not going to wonder where it went. You have like I my completely trust your judgment, like, and I always have and I always will trust that he knows what's going to work best in this thing. So sometimes, like, if I had something cut, and sometimes, like, for a solo video that I write, he'll send me something and I'll cut it. And but that's the kind of trust that you have in that, like, you both have the best interests of the video at heart. And so if he doesn't think that that aligns, or I don't think that aligns with like my solo video, like, we have that freedom to be able to say, like, hey, I'm gonna cut this, it's gonna be all right. Doesn't mean I don't think it doesn't mean I think less of your writing or less of your contributions. It's very much something where, um just the other day he mentioned he wasn't going to use this one line of mine, and I'm like, that's okay. Like, why? It's something where, like, I don't think I've ever chosen. I'm trying to think of like hills that I've really chosen to die on, and I can't think of any where, like, I'm telling Brian, like, hey, I wrote this and it must be in. Like, there are some times where, like, I pre-write the intro or outro song and I'll leave a line in there that alludes to it, that sets up the song, so that the song doesn't come out of nowhere and that people kind of get what I'm talking about. And sometimes I'll write, like, yeah, like, if it's okay, but if you're going to cut that line, let me know so I can redo the song. But that's the only time that I can really think of. But um, for the most part, and now I'm rambling. Oh, the sentimentality thing. There was a video where I wrote like this big long thing that I wasn't sure Brian was going to include about going to Boscov's, which is like a department store around here, where you get to. It's like when your mom takes you to go try on pants, and it's one of those things where, like, you don't want to do it, but you know that it's something that she's going to carry with her, of like these Saturdays in making you go into the Boscov's dressing room and try on pants. And it was like this sentimental passage, because that was kind of like my childhood. And man, for the life of me, I wish I could remember the car that it was for. But, like, it's not something that I went in with the intention of writing for it. It's just that, like, sometimes the car will remind you of experiences like that. When I think about like the Westphalia video that came out, like, I guess 2 weeks ago now, that it would be something where, I mean, it just sort of lets these old feelings marinate so that you end up feeling more like your younger self, even if you never necessarily had those experiences. I wrote a song for the video called The Great Unknown, and it's about my dad, who passed when I was very, very young. And so I never really got to know him. And it's, I was kind of like putting all those feelings of what it was like to not really know what it was, um, to have someone take you fishing or take you camping or take you, it's like wanting what everybody else had, or not necessarily everybody else, but wanting what other people have had, which is that like familial bond, and how the Westphalia is kind of like this, um, delivery mechanism for these types of memories, of how these bonds are created through vehicles like this, of like, hey, we're going on an adventure, everybody get into the camper van, we're going to go camping. And sure, maybe there are times where like the father takes a son out or the uncle takes a nephew out, and the kid would rather be anywhere else in the world. But sometimes you take somebody out and they wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Though there are good memories formed there. And I tried to take it from a point of like, if it were me, because I'm sort of mourning memories that I didn't have. It's like absence of field, where you kind of, the things that you miss are enlarged through their absence, of like, yeah, I don't know what some of these things are like to go canoeing with like dad. And so, you try to make do with what you get. Which I was fortunate enough to have like a great father figure in my life, although it was one of those things where he also passed when I was like younger. I was still a teenager. So you end up with these things of, you're kind of wondering where you're getting your comprehension of what it's like to be a man from. And you're the whole thing that I'm trying to live by is not to be someone that, you know, like my dad would have disliked, or that my mom would dislike, or that, it's just someone that like my family can point at and just say like, hey, he's one of ours, like he's our guy. It's that type of thing. And it's, I don't know, it's strange to be able to have a life where I get to write about family, I get to travel, well, obviously not right now, but where I get to have these experiences and bring things back for um, people, loved ones who maybe haven't gotten the opportunity to go to that many places. And I say it so many times and I'll never stop saying it, but it's that I feel so incredibly fortunate and lucky and blessed to be able to do what I get to do, because I mean, I have very simplistic dreams, and but like somehow the simplest dream of all was the biggest. And so I'm getting to live it, and every day that I get to live it, I'm happy. And so maybe, I'm not like as rapturously overjoyed about everything, every aspect of life, but in this one I am, because I get to be someone who, I don't know, like there are people in different countries who I've never, to where I've never been, who've sort of heard or been moved by things that I've written or things that I've said or things that I've sung. Eh. Um, and I've been lucky. I've just been so lucky, and I don't want to take any of it for granted. So yeah.
I think, when somebody is saying that someone is lucky and you're saying that you're lucky, I look at this and I'm like, well, it is timing and everything has stuff to do with it, but I don't think that it is all luck. There's obviously a lot of perseverance and a lot of work that's going into what you're doing. I wouldn't shortchange yourself. That's probably a lot of skill in there. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like,
uh,
oh, go ahead.
well, I just you said that you're living your dream right now. What's do you have like the next thing, or are you just totally just content and happy to be in this moment that you're in right now?
Yeah, I tend to focus on right now. I don't like, and I guess part of it is living with anxiety of you don't, and I've been dealing with anxiety disorder since I was 14. 15-ish, where like I didn't want to leave the house. I was sort of terrified of sort of, I don't know, I would just get anxiety attacks for no reason. I literally would think I was dying. I had been to the emergency room a few times. I had medical debt from going to the emergency room in my 20s that like took forever to pay off, and then other issues. It was just really hard to come to a place where I felt like I was mostly okay, like I am now. And part of it was recognizing that you can't live any farther ahead than this moment. Like now, don't get me wrong, you can plan. Like you obviously like are gonna want to like set aside money for the future, like invest in a Roth IRA or whatever. But like and start like making sure your quarterlies are paid for your taxes. But
All that
it's
old man stuff.
yeah, all that adult shit. Oh, sorry, can I swear on this?
You can swear out here. That's
Oh,
totally
all
fine.
right. Well, I don't intend to like blow up the thing with swears, but um, the whole idea is that just today is all that matters. So today I'm going to write. I'm going to finish my essay for Cash for Clunkers. Today, oh, I was going to talk to you, which I was looking forward to. Honestly, I woke up in the middle of the night last night and thought, oh my God, what day is today? Because I thought like the interview was supposed to be yesterday and I forgot. And then I'm like, wait, if the interview was supposed to be yesterday, he would have like messaged me or something. And then I woke up this morning and saw your thing of like well, technically this afternoon, because I woke up in the morning and then went about half the day realizing that like my phone was on silent like all night. So like I wasn't checking Twitter, and normally the only way that I ever would check Twitter is if I get a notification on my phone.
Sure.
So it's one of those things where like it was like 2 o'clock, and I'm like, I feel like I'm supposed to be having an interview today, and I don't think I've heard from him at all. Let me check my oh.
You were causing me a little bit of anxiety because there was so much radio silence there. But I don't want
Yeah.
to.
No,
That's
no, no.
great.
It's like I apologize. It was just I don't. I'm so not used to like having anyone want to talk to me solo. This is only my second solo interview on a podcast or show of any kind where it wasn't like me and Brian or me and like Brian and Ivan, or like which is fine. Like I love doing shows with those guys. But it's different when it's just me because I feel like we have fundamentally different, for as similar as we are, we do have fundamental differences that I think help the show in a way, because Brian grew up around cars, whereas I kind of didn't. And so I have more of an outsider's perspective on cars because I didn't necessarily grow up reading uh, auto manuals for comfort. Like I'm more of like the media savvy type of guy where like, I could round off, like I could tell you like every best picture winner, like that type of thing. Like I know a lot of useless shit, but it's also things that find their way into videos where I feel like if one person gets that joke, I will have succeeded. But I realize in doing so, I'm potentially alienating a bunch of other people who wouldn't get that joke. But it's also part and parcel of making a show that satisfies me, Brian making a show that satisfies him. Like he can make references to the game Deus Ex, and I can make references to like Final Fantasy games or Metal Gear games. Like in every RCR stories, there's always dates, and every time that dates go up on the screen of things that happen in this date, I go to this Metal Gear timeline wikia and try to find a date of something that happened that year in the Metal Gear timeline and just add that in there as if it were a real life thing that actually happened. And I'm starting to do that with like the BioShock series now too, because I realize that no matter where we are in the 20th century, pre
There's
1970, there's something that you can put in there. But Metal
yeah.
Gear, it's really because for an entire century, no matter what year you're in, something is happening somewhere in that timeline. So if I'm talking about like, the history of the Mustang and I come to 1964, or the pre-planning in the earlier 60s. And I'll talk about the virtuous mission. Like it's just like this happened here, virtuous mission, and see if anyone catches on the Easter eggs. Or
Well,
like
and
if,
this is
yeah,
this is a great because I asked Brian, I'm like, well, what video games do you play? And he's like, I don't play games anymore. I'm very casual about it, and so that obviously are parts of the script that you are putting more time into for us to get these references.
yeah.
Yeah,
One, one second, I got
please, yeah.
this is what I've been playing. I got wait, no, it's upside down, and
Oh
possibly
yes.
yeah, and what do you call it?
For our audio only listeners, he's holding up a Final Fantasy VII remake. Is that like the special
It's a
edition
tin,
case?
yeah, the special edition tin, and
10,
with it
yeah.
comes my Shinra employee key card. Um, I am employee number A65187961593. So someone will steal my identity, clearly. Leading progress with Mako. Yeah.
This is
I was in love with that game. People like Final Fantasy VII shaped so much of like who I am. I'm convinced I would have gotten laid so much more in high school, college, everything if I had just like been into normal things like cars and football. But no, I
I can
played.
tell you what, I traded away my Final Fantasy for NBA Live like 97 or 98 and I didn't get laid any faster. So you could
All right,
just set
well,
that aside. Don't worry about it.
yeah, I mean, and I still would have had like acne and everything to overcome and awkwardness. But like it's one of those things where like I went to go buy the Die Hard arcade trilogy for a reward for getting I think I don't even remember what I was getting rewarded for doing, but they were out of that, and then I had seen all the commercials for Final Fantasy VII, thought it looked cool, got that instead, played it for like an hour, took it out, wanted to take it back because I had never
Right.
played JRPG before. I'm like, what is this battle system? Then I just stuck with it, and it became like literally my favorite game of all time. I don't think I've ever played a video game more times than Final Fantasy VII. So when the remake finally happened and I was watching the opening, like I was getting all choked up like a
Yeah.
little kid because it felt like being 12 years old again. And
Uh-huh.
even when people like I heard that people were like mad about like certain changes that happen, like none of those bothered me because like this is the thing, and it was an essay that I was gonna write, but I couldn't think of a way to make it apply to cars. But I came up with this. Well, I don't know that I came up with this, but I haven't found anything that's like this theory wise, but I'm sure it exists. I'm almost positive it has to. But like the death of the author is such that by Roland Barthes, um, it states that like once an author has completed a work, it's out of his hands, and it's open to interpretation, and all those interpretations are valid. um but I was kind of thinking of like this inverse death of the author where it's something that I called like the entitlement of art, which is that if a thing exists, we almost feel pre-entitled to ownership of it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Whereas like yes, it doesn't matter that the original lead writer of Final Fantasy VII did the remake and decided that he was going to change a bunch of things. Like Final Fantasy VII was our experience, and now we feel pre-entitled to saying no, you don't get to do that. You don't get to change things.
This was our childhood.
Yeah, yeah,
We
and
experienced these things. You can't change it. I mean,
yeah.
yeah.
Despite the fact that ultimately you it doesn't take away the original. Like the original's still there. The only reason that I would be upset is if I wanted to introduce Final Fantasy VII to my nephew, and which he's not interested in at all anyway. But but if I wanted to, I couldn't because this is too esoteric for him. Like there's no way he would ever understand it because the game presumes that you're deeply familiar with the original. So, and we get the same thing with Star Wars where people get mad about, well, no, you don't get to like do all this. And granted, like I get where people are coming from because they say any auteur who gets a hold of a famous property and then changes things in a way that people don't like will always justify it by saying either we did it for the fans or I did it because I felt it was the best or I was serving the story. Like serving the story is always the route that they go. And ultimately, no, you're doing what you would want to see if you were in charge and you happen to be in charge, but don't say that that's what anyone wanted to see. It's like you're essentially changing it because you feel like the natural progression of a story is too simplistic, and which is fine. I like The Last Jedi. Don't get me wrong. It always comes back to The Last Jedi, but
It
I
does.
I liked The Last Jedi, but and I understand that Ryan Johnson felt that there was something profound to say about failure by developing character through instances of failure. But I'm sorry, the Cantabite sequence is not good, and the Poe Admiral Holdo thing makes less
Yeah,
sense every time you see it.
I
Like
know.
I didn't
That
even have a problem with Grumpy Luke. It was just
no.
it was the other things that he tried to kind of that were attempt and like The Rise of Skywalker is a deeply like flawed movie. I still enjoyed it, but I'm not going to pretend that it made any sense. It's but then if you look at it, it's like when has Star Wars ever really made sense? It's like how does Leia remember her mother? It's like because he was making it up as he went along. Like I it's one of those things where and in Star Wars is a special case in the sense that with Final Fantasy VII remake, if a person doesn't like what happens, they can still have the original. If people don't like the special editions, good luck finding the original. George Lucas,
Yeah.
and this is the same George Lucas that and God bless him for giving us this incredible universe that I've loved. Secondary to Final Fantasy, but like Star Wars is like my second favorite thing. It's that you ultimately are in this place where he gives you this world, but then he kind of takes it away, and then to a lot of people with the prequels, he makes it worse. I love the prequels because I kind of grew up with them too, as a teenager, so I didn't have a problem with those, but I recognize their flaws. But then with the sequels, everyone's like, "Oh man, we should have had George on here." I'm like, the same George Lucas who like added this horrible no scream to the end of Return of the Jedi when
Oh, I
Vader's
know.
finally having his redemptive moment. Like, yeah, I'm like nerding out here because it just bugs me so much, and it's like there's no one to really talk about this with, because like anywhere you go online, people have already hashed it out. You're shouting into the void and it's an echo chamber and all this, but ultimately I feel like we're in a stage of media where people feel just pre entitled to
A
having
sense of
things fixed.
ownership before they even received their dose of the media. I
Exactly. And
do you
in a
do you see
way,
that happening with RCR? Do you see that happening with your content that you're coming out with?
yeah, a little bit, because people feel like they're no longer in some instances feel like they're no longer getting the show that they signed up for, which I understand. It's completely um understandable. But to that I would just say that like not many shows that are creative in nature, like it would be the same show if we were always talking about the car, if we were always doing walkarounds, if we were always talking brass tacks and specs and technical readouts and all that stuff. That would be something that wouldn't have to change. But as a show where we're trying to inject a narrative or creativity into it, you can't do the poop jokes every week, but you also can't do like the sentimentality rant every week. You can't do the sort of, non sequitur skits every week. You have to find different ways to diversify your content um, in a way that keeps it fresh for the viewer, but keeps it fresh for you so that you don't get bored doing it, because
Right.
it's easy for like YouTuber burnout is a very real thing. And so what I would say is that I would hope that our fans are such that they understand um why we need to change some things every now and then, but that fundamentally the the skeleton and the heart and the soul of RCR are still in there. Because if you look back at even during like our golden age of videos, like we still had like
This boggles my mind that you're saying that you've had a golden age. I mean, you've been doing it for 5 years now. Is
it's like closer to 6 now.
closer to
It's
six
weird.
years. So that's weird. You kind of look back and you think like, okay, this is a golden age. Was that the hockey stick of growth when people were just very excited to find you as a new thing? What
Well,
what what are you defining as golden age? That's
I
interesting.
mean, I mean golden age in terms of like people, in terms of like the quality of videos, because we had like the videos that people still talk about today that they really like the Grand Cherokee and the Dodge Aspen, and like
Yeah.
the BMW's 330 Ci review, and like the Forerunner, like all these videos that people think about when they think about RCR. And so, but
But you
even
didn't mention the Miata video.
and the Miata video, yeah, the Dodge Avenger, but like all these videos, even during these eras, we still had like clunkers where, I remember this one video where I told Brian, hey, I have a passage that I want you to read, but in the video, I want you to read it with the accent of this guy. And I sent him a video. And it was William S. Burroughs, the author. And absolutely no one understood what we were going for with that. And so I'm like, okay, I'm never going to do that again. And I don't even remember what my point was in trying to get him to read it like William S. Burroughs, other than I thought it would be funny, like the cadence. And then there was another one, and I forget the video, where he did the entire video in character as Kevin Spacey's character from K-Pax.
I
Um,
remember that.
so
That
there
that
were
one
like,
sticks with me as a giant like like okay, they're trying to push out. They're trying to find what's interesting or what's new. So tell me more about that one.
well, I mean, that was literally like Brian's idea, because he had gotten like a million messages from people that were either, hey, you sound like Kevin Spacey, or hey, you sound like Adam Scott. I'm like, well, we should just like roll into it and do like a kind of reference. Like there was one where like I had him literally just say like a line or two from American Beauty and see if anyone noticed. Um, Now, of course, now it's not like great to
Yeah.
call Kevin Spacey to mind, but everything ages poorly.
Eh,
Everything
and
ages
yeah,
like milk in this
yep.
era.
I was just gonna say age like milk. The thing is, when you started talking at the beginning of this, you're kind of going back and redoing things, and I feel like that's part of growth. You look back on something, and you're like, oh, I wish I could change that. Well, in your case, you can change that, but then whose property is it? We've kind of went into all these different directions in this interview. Nick, what else can we say other than thanks for coming on the show? What do you want to promote? Is it the Westphalia video? Is it your
Oh,
RCR stories?
well, the Westphalia video, just type in, well, I mean, regular cars, Volkswagen, Vanagon, Westphalia, or just type in regular cars, almost like home. It's a short film, but it's done in a, or it's an RCR video, but it's done in a short film style. Uh, Took a good chunk of time to work on. Filmed it in Canada. We basically put this all together with Ivan the filmmaker and his company, Visual Inclination Media. Or no, there is no media at the end of it. It's just Visual Inclination. And Ivan is a very gifted, very talented filmmaker. And Oliver, the owner of the vehicle, and his friend Andre were instrumental in helping us get it made, uh, through their kind volunteering and company and hard work. But that's the video that, like, if I had the chance to show someone the apex of what I think we could do, it's either that or the PT Cruiser video. Because I feel like those are like the pinnacle of that's like peak RCR, because you get like the weird, you get the insightful, but you get like the sentimentality, and you get like the offhand one liner, the weird jokes. But it also is a little more subdued. But I feel like with the Westphalia video, people can kind of see what we're going for at a deeper sort of narrative level, And so
You
I
can
feel very
show it to
fortunate.
the Westphalia video is something you can show to anyone and they can appreciate it on so many different levels. You don't have to be a car person to enjoy it. And I think you struck an amazing balance, and it's so well produced, so well written. And of course it has your song at the end, which is a very real track. So
Yep. Thank you.
so if you haven't watched it already and you're listening to this, go watch this right now.
Oh, and
Because
sorry. And just last thing, because my nephew's going to kill me if I don't do this, but Limited Time Roman. It's our personal show on YouTube. We only have like 1,000 subscribers, but it's channel. It's my personal channel where we go and we review weird food stuff and get into adventures. And last week I had him like cut my hair because I hadn't, whatever. Like it's not bad, honestly. It's because my hair was like out of control from quarantine head because I didn't even have a haircut before all this went down, so I was really overdue. But yeah, it's just Limited Time Roman on YouTube.
it's a YouTube channel, Limited Time Roman. Well, I'll make sure to link to it in the show notes so other people can go check it out.
Yeah, it's just
Nick,
a little thing. It's like the most wholesome thing that you probably find on the internet, but still.
the world can deal with some more wholesome stuff at the moment, so we'll make sure to put that on there. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for your time and the stories, and I can't wait to talk again sometime. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
And thank you so much for having me. I mean, it's been a blast, honestly. I wish I actually had more time, but you know how it is. But thank you so much for having me on. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Joe Q Car Show. To gain access to our exclusive after show, known as Reaction Time, cleverly named, I know, head over to patreon.com/JoeQCar, and you'll get to hear our behind-the-scenes thoughts, get some follow-up questions, get some tidbits we left out of the show as little extras. And in addition to the Reaction Time after show, you'll also receive a bunch of other benefits. You'll get behind the scenes updates, maybe some stickers, advance notice of who's coming on the show. You could even hang out with me if you're at that tier. There's a bunch of different things. Please go check them out. It's all at patreon.com/JoeQCar. Thank you so much for listening. I can talk all day. So until next time, goodbye for now.
Thank you for tuning in. Let's go. This is the Joe Q Car Show. You know right now I got a full tank, so if you ready, we can hit the road. Ayy, old school, it's the best. Mixtapes on cassettes, keep the rims so fresh. Yeah, electric cars, yeah, they the bomb. Racing cars, Formula One, we love it all. So if you love the episode, come back for another.